Good morning, everyone. It's our pleasure to be here to share with you our study named Applying Design Thinking in Initial Teacher Education, a reflection from reflective practice activities. This is a scheduled poster presentation, so I will try to be as brief and concise as possible. First, let me tour you through the key parts of the poster. We will start by looking at the rationale for the study, which will picture the current trends and new direction in English language teacher education. Then we're going to see the objectives and a summary of the methodology of this study. The theoretical background will be discussed thoroughly to lay a strong foundation for the design of the project, in this case, the reflective teaching project. In the key findings section, I will describe the project requirements in detail before mapping the project steps with the steps in the Stanford Design Thinking Model. Much time will then be devoted to the analysis of the effectiveness of design thinking in improving students' critical reflection in this particular project. There are two important conclusions being drawn from this research, and the report ends with a shortlisted reference and also the author's contact information. All right, so let's start. Let us introduce ourselves. We are Thuy and Nguyen Phuong. We're from the University of Languages and International Studies, Vietnam National University, Hanoi. We're both lecturers and teacher trainers at the Division of English Language Teaching Methodology. Okay, now let's come to our main story today. The types of problems educational professionals encounter in practice are complex and varied, from designing curriculum to motivating students in content areas to communicating effectively with parents and to countless other issues. Such problems of practice are open-ended, challenging, with many possibilities, but no single solution. So what can be done? Reflective practice has been the dominant way in ELT teacher education for the past 2 decades since the emergence of the post-method era. While traditional models rely on one-way transmission of knowledge and the imitation of idealized practice, reflective practice places teachers at the center of their own development as they are responsible to analyze and evaluate their own practice, initiate change, and monitor the effects of this change. And Cornish and Jenkins 2012 also argue that teachers who engage in regular critical reflection shape their own development, and this kind of self-assessment is the key element in continuous self-improvement and consequently teacher quality. Enhancing teacher quality can therefore start by preparing reflective and effective practitioners. This means that reflection on one's teaching should be encouraged from the beginning of the learning to teach process. And also by thinking like a designer. For example, by examining how students experience different aspects of school, much as a professional designer may consider how people use the products, physical spaces, or other artifacts. Teachers might better understand the challenges and identify ways in order to move forward. And in teacher education, a design thinking model offers teachers to be the kind of support towards practice-oriented and holistic models of constructivist learning in projects. So with this kind of new trends and direction in English language teacher education, there must be changes in a way that we train our student teachers to become more reflective. So with this particular study, we look into the use of design thinking as a conceptual and methodological framework to empower critical reflection skills of senior students teachers. And more specifically, these are the senior student teachers at the Faculty of English Language Teacher Education in University of Languages and International Studies. So how do we do that? We do this kind of evaluation by firstly, mapping a reflective teaching project that the senior student teachers have to do with the steps in design thinking framework. And then we assess the value of this application by conducting analysis of related documents as well as project products. We also conduct analysis with students' feedback, students' reflection, and group reports. The number of students who participate in this course is 16, and they are all senior student teachers. That means they are already in their 4th year at the university. All right, now let's explore the theoretical background for this particular research. This particular research is laid on 3 theories. The first one is project-based learning. The second one is becoming a critically reflective teacher with 4 levels of reflection, and the standard design thinking model. So I'm going to start with project-based learning. Project-based learning is a teaching method in which teachers learn by actively engaging in real-world and personally meaningful projects. Students work on a project over an extended period of time, from a week up to a semester, and that engages them in solving a real-world problem or answering a complex question. They demonstrate their knowledge and skills by creating a public product or presentation for real audience. And as a result, students develop deep content knowledge as well as critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication skills. Project-based learning unleashes a contagious creative energy among students and teachers. The second principle that we based our research on is the division of reflection into levels. In this particular research, we are using the categories by Larry V. 2000, in which reflection will be categorized into 4 levels. The lowest level is pre-reflection or non-reflection. At this level, developing teachers react to students and classroom situation automatically without conscious consideration of alternative responses. They attribute the ownership of problems to students or others and perceiving themselves as the victims of circumstances. They take things for granted without questioning and do not adapt their teaching based on students' responses and needs. At surface level of reflection, the teacher's reflection focuses on strategies and methods used to reach predetermined goals. Teachers are concerned with what works rather than with any consideration of the value of the goals as ends in themselves. And the term service was chosen to depict a broader scope than technical concerns, while connoting that values beliefs and assumptions that lie beneath the surface are not being considered at this level of reflection. Pedagogical reflection. At this level, practitioners apply the field's knowledge base and current beliefs about what represents quality practices. At the level of pedagogical reflection, teachers reflect on educational goals, the theories underlying approaches, and the connections between theoretical principles and practice. Teachers engaging in pedagogical reflection, they strive to understand the theoretical basis for the classroom practice and to foster consistency between espoused theory, that means what they say, what they do, what they believe, and the theory in use, that is what they actually do in the classroom. The highest level of reflection is critical reflection, and at this level, the teachers reflect on the moral and ethical implications and consequences of their classroom practices on students. Critical reflection involves examination of both personal and professional belief systems. The other theory that we based our research on is design thinking framework, and to be more specific, this is the Stanford design thinking model. So among the voices suggesting that design is applicable in education, some have suggested the role of the teacher as akin to a designer. And they suggest that because teachers are challenged to create novel practices that address 21st century educational purposes, they are in a position to be active and creative designers of experience. The Stanford design thinking model has 5 phases of design thinking, and they're referred to as modes. These 5 modes are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. They are intended to be flexible and iterative so that at any point a designer might need to repeat or reconsider a phase. The designers, the teachers, and others can cycle through the process or re-enter the modes to understand and explore the problems and solution by engaging any of the 5 modes. For empathize, this is the empathize with stakeholders in order to understand the problem. Then define the problem. Then ideate in order to gather as many solution ideas as possible, from the commonplace to the wide and everything in between. Prototype means choosing a solution to create and build a concrete model from, and testing, that is, you try out the prototype solution with the students to get perspective on what works, what does not, what needs to be done or redone. So basing on these 3 principles as the theoretical background, I have come up with the project requirements for the students. I will return to the project requirements later on when I analyze the final project. And now let's look at how the reflective teaching project can be mapped with steps in design thinking process. So this is our key findings. The design of the reflective teaching project for senior student teachers can be easily mapped to the 5 steps in the design thinking process, as presented above. Now, in the first step, empathize, I myself, as the designer, observed my student teachers in their micro teaching, and I also exchanged feedback with them in the first written reflection. From my observation and my exchange of feedback, I was able to discover a number of problems. For example, the two most urgent problem that I myself defined involved, firstly, most of the reflection at this stage were at service level reflection only, and my student teachers didn't find writing reflection useful to them. In other words, they didn't see anything interesting and meaningful in writing kinds of reflection. So in order to come up with different ideas to solve this problem, first I organized a small workshop. This workshop focused on impacts of critical reflection to the student themselves, as well as the students themselves as a teacher in the future. And also in the workshop, there were a number of methods in order to achieve higher level of reflection were introduced to the students. And of course, students got some practice with these methods too. And then I gave students plenty of time for their discussion so that they can come up with different solutions in order to enhance their reflection quality. And also at this stage, I explained to the students clearly the differences among the 4 levels of reflection and how beneficial reflection can be for them if they are able to conduct reflection at pedagogical level as well as reflective level. So when we had been able to generate a number of solutions, the teacher and the student agreed upon a final project. The final project of reflective teaching had the driving question as how important is literature to teachers' teaching decision. Now, for the driving question here, we chose to discuss the importance of literature because this is one very important step for the student to push their level of reflection up because at pedagogical level of reflection and reflective level of reflection, they must be able to utilize literature to support their teaching. And the final products that the teacher and the students have agreed upon were an exhibition in which the student would conduct poster presentation, and they would also have to submit their written reports. The testing step consists of student teachers doing the following things. They conducted the project, they exhibited their products, they submitted their second written reflection and reports. So when we come up with the final project, this is a more specific requirement list for the reflective teaching project. So in groups, students must choose at least they had to choose one most problematic or successful point of their micro teaching. Then they needed to explain the reasons behind the problem or the success. They were requested to connect their explanations with literature and research. That means they had to study the literature around the problem or the success point. And then they used literature and research in order to provide the explanation for the reasons behind the problem or the success. They were requested to explain if they would do anything differently when if they were given a chance to teach that part of the lesson again, and also to suggest other techniques to succeed the teaching point. Then they would make a poster presentation, and when they were in the exhibition, they must be ready to be challenged by teachers and peers. So with this particular project requirements in which we apply the steps of design thinking in order to design the project, we see that this one had been useful and effective to students in a number of ways. Firstly, this project fosters students' critical evaluation and knowledge transfer. So you can see this is one example of the students' poster presentation. So for example, with this group, they chose the topic of giving feedback in EFL teaching, because during their micro teaching, they had problem with giving feedback. And also, the improvement, enhancement of critical evaluation and knowledge transfer can also be seen in the teacher's comments to students' reflection. Okay, and the knowledge transfer can be observed via students' presentation. They listened to their friends delivering the presentation, and also they asked questions and they challenged their friends with difficult questions. Another value of design thinking in improving students' critical reflection is that it prepared students to solve meaningful challenges. So the topic of this project, the driving question of this project, has already been a meaningful challenge to the students, because it relates closely to they themselves. And when they do this kind of poster presentation, this is actually a chance for them to model pedagogical level of reflection, as well as becoming more reflective, more critical in their reflection. So apart from the poster presentation, we have this kind of feedback between teachers and students as well. And the teacher also challenged the students with deeper reflection of the points that they are reflecting on. So from these key findings, we'd like to come to the conclusion, to two conclusions, in fact. The first conclusion is regarding design thinking. We can see that design thinking can be an effective structure for teacher education, and it can support teachers to address the problems, and which open up new directions and challenges, especially in research area and practice area as well. For conclusion two, a teacher education course like this one that prepares reflective designer teachers can offers teachers to be beneficial skills to engage with design in their own professional practices and in addressing problems of practice. And this course can also equip teachers with skills and tools to deal with complexity and challenges on numerous fronts and across varied contexts. Okay, so to conclude, I would like to remark that design thinking can enrich teacher education, since it exposes students to especially those with little prior teaching experience, to more challenges in their fields and enhances their ability to tackle these problems. Thank you for your listening.